Pernah satu saat teman saya, seorang supir taksi yang mangkal di pelabuhan, mendapatkan seorang penumpang dari Singapura. Ini keluar lagi bersama kawannya untuk diantarkan ke sebuah klinik. Di tengah perjalanan inilah terjadi pembicaraan antara si supir taksi dengan kedua wanita tersebut. Yang membuat saya shock adalah proses pengguguran kandungan yang terjadi di klinik tersebut. Bahwasanya janin yang ada yang digugurkan itu di blender. Nah, itu yang bikin saya shock. Diceritakan juga sama saya setelah di blender dibuang kayak macam di tempat sampah gitu. Kalau yang saya dengar dari cerita kawan itu, kenapa kok di blender? Karena untuk menghilangkan jejak dari perbuatan mereka. Karena ya aborsi itu kan sesuatu yang ilegal. Marak sih kejadian-kejadian pengguguran kandungan itu di Batam. Kasus-kasus pengguguran bayi, ditemukan bayi di tempat sampah, dan sebagainya itu banyak. Bukan rahasia umum lagi.
In Indonesia, abortions are allowed only in rare circumstances, such as in medical emergencies or in cases of severe fetal anomaly. Yet, on the Indonesian island of Batam, there is a network of brokers connecting pregnant women to clinics offering abortions illegally. Many of these women arrive from Singapore.
Karena peraturan di sana juga melarang pekerja migran, khususnya domestic worker untuk hamil di Singapura. Saya dengar banyak yang berusaha untuk menggugurkan kandungannya. Banyaknya pekerja migran yang mungkin melakukan aborsi di Batam, mungkin karena Batam dekat dengan Singapura dan hanya bisa ditempuh hanya dengan naik ferry.
In 2015, Sunny discovered she was expecting.
Find a bit giddiness and sleepy, and I find that my period come late. I was in the relationship when I found out that I'm pregnant. He's caring. He's also loving. He's also sweet. He's a very sweet guy.
For Vinny, the pregnancy was also unplanned. She and her husband already have 2 sons, and they weren't planning on expanding the family.
I told my husband that, oh, you make me pregnant. He said that maybe it's a baby girl. Yeah, because he really wants a baby girl.
Pregnancy for many is a joyous revelation. But for both Vinny and Sunny, this discovery is the start of a nightmare. Because both of them are foreign domestic workers based in Singapore. And under the conditions of their work permits, they are not allowed to become pregnant or deliver a child here. Which is why they have both asked for their real names to be withheld.
只要女佣一怀孕，就没有商量的余地，要马上终止合约，送她回国，因为这是我们劳工部的规定，只要她一怀孕就要终止雇佣合约了。
The rule is so strict that employers are expected to report their domestic workers' pregnancy to the authorities.
雇主必须买机票或者船票，然后之后呢，他们就要安排送她去机场。我们会确保女佣 会进入闸门，不会跑掉。Your gate is C18.
Yes, ma'am.
In Singapore, there are over 246,000 live-in helpers, mainly from Indonesia, Myanmar, and the Philippines. And there are pregnancy restrictions in place, largely because of domestic concerns about uncontrolled immigration.
The law came about in the 80s. It's really to do with the citizenship regime in Singapore. People who are considered highly skilled, an employment pass and S passes, they are allowed to settle here. They are allowed to bring their families, apply for PR and citizenship. But in Singapore, we want an immigration of highly skilled migrants with specific skills. Most domestic workers are not seen as having those skills that we desire. In fact, they're seen as a disposable population in some ways. I think the issue of pregnancy is that this might create a situation where children of migrants or migrants themselves aspire to a more permanent status, right? Especially if the father of the child is Singaporean or a permanent resident.
To prevent that, domestic workers are not allowed to get pregnant or deliver a child in Singapore unless they are already married to a Singapore citizen or permanent resident with the Manpower Ministry's approval. This applies even after their work permits are expired, cancelled, or revoked.
It's in the same spirit as policing what they do while they were here on a work permit. You're not here to find a husband or to get a boyfriend. So, which is why it just generally discourages them from cultivating personal relationships while they are here as on their work permit.
The fear is that the mother who might have to draw on state resources, because a lot of domestic workers are not highly skilled. If they have to rely on state resources, then becomes a drain on the state.
The penalty for being pregnant extends beyond the termination of the employment contract.
It's not a hard and fast thing that is written into the law, but we have encountered a lot of domestic workers who have previously, their pregnancies has been discovered by the authorities, and then when they return home and they try to apply for a new work pass or they try to renew their existing work pass, it's found not be possible.
Various maid employment agencies and Maids Undercover Asia spoke to say it's a common occurrence. Pregnant maids sent back find themselves no longer able to return to work in Singapore.
Well, I guess when we look at it from a legalistic perspective, it's someone who's broken the law, right? But I think there's also a more latent understanding, because a domestic worker who has gotten pregnant is seen as also a moral problem.
I mean, sure, they can go to another country, but that means getting used to a totally different set of rules, totally different contacts, creating contacts there, incurring more debt.
Undercover Asia spoke to several domestic workers about why they would still want to return to Singapore.
Only in Singapore, you can choose if you want to transfer, you can transfer.
Because I choose here because they say it's clean and safety. The food is very good also.
At least we have once a week off. At least we have 1 day freedom.
But Vinny knows firsthand that pocket of freedom and safety comes at a price. Giving up her reproductive rights. She conceived a baby with her husband during her home leave. In doing so, she's violated the conditions for her work permit as a domestic worker in Singapore. Her family depends on her income for survival. Being sent back could mean financial ruin.
We are farmers. Then if the crops is not good, then nothing to eat, nothing to buy things. If you don't have work, how you raise a baby? I asked my friend, what should I do? Should I take pills to take it out? Yeah, really, I really think about it.
While she grappled with how to prevent imminent deportation, Vinny's symptoms were fast giving her away.
So I keep vomiting, headache. I always sleepy. Then I take a 1-year-old boy, so I cannot do my work properly already.
To add to that, she was due for her health screening in less than 6 months' time. As a deterrence, migrant domestic workers must do health screenings once every half a year to test for pregnancy. The results are submitted to the Manpower Ministry.
They serve as a regulatory measure to remind domestic workers that, look, if you get pregnant, you will be detected within 6 months before the pregnancy fully comes to term.
Finally, when she was in her second month of pregnancy, Vinny decided to come clean to her employer. While her employer decided to send Vinny packing, she did not report her pregnancy to the authorities.
She helped me there, so whenever I want to come back, I can easily come back. I'm very happy. I'm very blessed and very thankful to have an employer like her.
Vinny managed to return to Singapore to work after giving birth to a baby girl in the Philippines. But happy endings like Vinny's are few and far between.
And then after that, she told, "Oh my goodness, it's positive." Then she cried. I was also shocked. What have I done?
You are new here. Remember your purpose here is to earn money. Don't have boyfriend, okay? Later you get yourself into trouble. You go home, men will laugh at you, okay?
Maid agent Samantha Chan makes it a point to drill the same message to every new domestic worker that comes through her doors. Do not get pregnant, or you will be sent home and barred from ever returning to Singapore to work.
In Indonesia, also tell me cannot get pregnant. And after coming Singapore, agency also told me about cannot get pregnant.
每2-3个月，我们都会打电话跟雇主还是女佣聊聊，看看他们的表现。在那个时候，如果有必要，我会再提醒他们一次。
Indonesian domestic worker Sunny fell in love with a Singaporean Chinese man during her stint here. They had sex on her off days, without contraception.
After that, I got pregnant. I just told him that I'm pregnant, and I asked him to responsible. And because of that, he told me that we just actually had a family. So at the time, I feel very stressed actually and depressed, and I also don't want to abort the baby. Okay, I feel like I really did the mistake, and I need to do another mistake, which is abort the baby, killing my own baby, you know. And I'm so scared to go back home because I don't know that my parents will accept me or not. It's really, really unplanned pregnancy, and I also never wish to get pregnant during my working time because at the time I still need to support my family.
Contraceptives are readily available in Singapore. Condoms can be easily bought for around $3 for a pack of 3. But for a domestic worker who earns only $450 on average a month, that's still a substantial expense. Birth control pills and emergency contraception are even more expensive to them because they require a doctor's prescription. Cost aside, there are other deterrent factors as well.
The oral pills, they don't like because got the effect. The boy don't want to use any protection like that.
Some helpers, they want to get pregnant because they want to become husband, the boyfriend. But some boyfriends got family also.
Sunny and her boyfriend chose not to use contraception. There are others who do, but misinformation is rife. Jeff used to work in Singapore. He asked to have his real identity hidden. Back in 2018, he had an affair with a migrant domestic worker in the city-state. He thought he could depend on her to take the precautions.
Do a loud clap, okay?
Okay. Then she told me it's okay. It's okay. Okay, I'm going to drink something. I trusted her that, okay, she knows what to do, it's safe. It's like a medicine that you're going to mix some soda drinks.
What Jeff's girlfriend thought she was taking was the morning after pill, which prevents pregnancy with minimal side effects. It turns out she was scammed into buying fake medicine.
It's actually like some over-the-counter meds for headaches. She was on an off day, and then she's suspecting something already. That's why she tried to have a pregnancy test by her own. And then after that, she told, oh my goodness, it's positive. Then she cried. I was also shocked. What have I done?
Okay, it's now 10:13, and you can see that there's already quite a lot of activity going on at the hotels.
Stephen is a private investigator. He needs his real identity hidden to allow him to do his job. Some of his clients hire him to tail their domestic workers. And there are times when he ends up in places like these, especially on Sundays, the day of the week when most domestic workers get their day off.
This is one of the unique places in Singapore where you have close concentration of budget hotels. So you see, we just randomly stop here. You see three couples already. Then there are others hanging around. Here's the back entrance to another hotel. You can see a lot of people waiting around.
But some of these rendezvous go beyond the usual love affairs or sex dates.
We've come across cases whereby we are asked to trail domestic helpers, and they can be seen, within a span of a day. They make 4 or 5 visits to 4 or 5 different hotels, or even the same hotel sometimes, with different men. At times, we also see them being paid. We've seen amounts exchanging hands, like $150, $200. You just go to the hotel, 2 hours, come out, and then they split up after that. Usually we can observe them for a while and see that some of those, they're a bit distant and stand a bit further apart, then we would suspect that they might be there for sexual services or to provide sexual services. They would tend to put on a little bit more makeup, perhaps to present themselves better or look nicer.
Every year, Stephen receives up to 20 requests from employers to trail their helpers. About 2 or 3 of them would be engaged in sex work.
I would imagine the actual numbers are much higher because there is it's a demand and supply thing whereby, you do have foreign male workers who may look for such services, and at the same time there are domestic workers who are willing to provide the service due to financial difficulty. Employers are concerned about or whether they may get pregnant.
Be it through sex work, a love affair, or misinformed birth control methods. When domestic workers do conceive in Singapore, the repercussions when found out are the same: deportation, which leads some to take desperate measures to hide their pregnancies.
Saat mereka berada di shelter, tiba-tiba mereka mengalami pendarahan. Ya kami kaget, soalnya kan pendarahannya agak hebat gitu.
To avoid having their financial lifeline in Singapore terminated, some pregnant helpers leave Singapore to get an illegal abortion in Batam, which is just a 45-minute ferry ride away. Rahayu runs a shelter for domestic workers. Most of them come here after facing issues while working in Singapore. For those who are pregnant, the shelter is a place to see through their pregnancy rather than to seek an illegal abortion. It's a place to hide from the shame of having a child out of wedlock in a conservative society.
Saya pernah menangani kasus tersebut, beberapa kasus dari Singapura. Mereka harus melakukan aborsi tersebut karena mau pulang ke keluarganya ditolak, sama pacarnya tidak bertanggung jawab. Mungkin tidak mudah juga bagi pekerja migran itu sendiri untuk menjelaskan ke keluarganya karena kita tahu bahwa kehamilan di luar nikah adalah masih dianggap aib keluarga.
So, few domestic workers hiding their pregnancies take the option of keeping the baby and giving birth at the shelter, as even fewer employers would agree for their domestic workers to take no-pay leave for months on end.
Even if they were to leave the country for a short period of time, they would have to explain themselves to their employers, and employers may say no. Domestic workers are usually very scared to do anything that might jeopardize their employment.
For those who don't want to risk an underground procedure or can't leave Singapore, they turn to another quick and dirty solution that's arguably riskier but requires no traveling. Abortion pills sold in Singapore via online platforms. Abortion pills have to be prescribed by a local medical doctor. But sellers lurking on social media often prey on pregnant helpers looking for a way out.
Of course, they're hiding their identity, they're using a fake account. You can just read the all comment there, then you can find that person. All seller is so nice. Majority, yes, very nice.
Through domestic workers in the know, Undercover Asia connects with a seller of illegal abortion pills over a WhatsApp chat. We pose as a maid who is 3 months pregnant. The seller reveals that she's from Indonesia, working in Singapore as a domestic worker for the past 9 years. The seller was also quick to share instructions on when and how to take them, and even gave reassurance on the safety of the pills to end a pregnancy that is over 10 weeks. Cytotec is the brand name for the drug misoprostol, typically prescribed to end pregnancies that are less than 2.5 months. Beyond that, the chances of a failed abortion are higher. To avoid fueling the illegal trade, we ended the conversation without paying.
Salotec is legal in the context of a medically supervised protocol. It also happens to be the most popular smuggled medication for abortion in Singapore.
In a medically supervised abortion, another drug needs to be taken before Cytotec, a drug called mifepristone.
So the function of mifepristone is to increase the sensitivity of the uterus to the effect of Cytotec by about 5 times. I think it's almost impossible to get on the black market because it's really within medical circles. So medication that they take that doesn't work completely and they have symptoms of infection inside, and then you need to offer them a procedure to clear off the remaining stuff before severe infection comes in, affects their fertility.
Jadi kami pernah menangani 2 orang pekerja migran dari Singapura yang kami tahu pada saat itu dalam keadaan yang kurang sehat. Dan saat mereka berada di shelter, tiba-tiba mereka mengalami pendarahan dan kita bawa ke klinik. Ya kami kaget, soalnya kan pendarahannya agak hebat gitu.
They are runaway migrant workers referred to the shelter for issues they faced with their employers while working in Singapore. But it turns out they were faced with a bigger problem that they had tried to solve by themselves.
Dan kita bawa ke klinik, dan saat di klinik itulah kita baru tahu kalau pekerja tersebut dalam keadaan hamil dan mengalami keguguran. Kami tanyakan ke mereka bahwa ya mereka mengalami kehamilan waktu di Singapura oleh pacarnya, dibelikan obat untuk menggugurkan kandungannya. Salah satu kasus yang kami tangani adalah saat kami ketahui anak dari bayi tersebut mengalami cacat atau keterbelakangan. Kecacatan yang ditanggung oleh bayinya itu mungkin juga karena konsumsi obat tersebut.
Ironically, there is a legal and safe option within Singapore for domestic workers with unwanted pregnancies. While it is against the law for domestic workers to be pregnant in Singapore, it is not illegal for them to seek an abortion in the Republic.
Basically, the patient's confidentiality is sacrosanct, so other than the patient, you're not supposed to tell anyone. Abortion, confidentiality, type of privacy is of a higher level than normal medical confidentiality. The confidentiality of an abortion is protected by law. It's written into law.
Which means that the doctors are not required to inform the Manpower Ministry about the details of a pregnancy or abortion, and the domestic worker can then evade detection. But these abortions cost anything from $545 to a few thousand $, depending on complications involved and the type of hospital. An amount many helpers can ill afford. Sunny refuses to contemplate any of these options. She wanted to keep a child, so she terminated her contract earlier and left for Indonesia.
Just told my employer that, oh, I miss my family. Yeah, I want to go back home.
But instead of going home, she stayed in the Batam shelter, Yayasan Dunia Viva Wanita, for about 14 months.
The shelter people was very good. They are very good, very kind, and they treat me like a family in there. So when my baby was 3 months old, they allowed me to stay a bit longer. And over there, I also help up to like cook. They will help up with my needs, like I need to see doctor, and after that, like vitamin, medication, pregnancy milk powder, food, toiletries, everything. Whatever that I need, they provide for me.
Setelah melahirkan, biasanya kita ke tahap kita berusaha untuk bagaimana anak ini bisa diterima di keluarganya kembali, dan setelah keluarganya memang udah kita belikan tiket untuk pemulangan, dan kita terus pantau memastikan kalau anak tersebut sudah sampai ke keluarganya. Dan setelah itu proses lagi untuk bekerja di luar negeri dan anak mereka tinggal dengan kerabat terdekatnya.
Sunny kept her pregnancy from her employer because under the Manpower Ministry's rules, employers are required to report to the authorities if they find that their maid is pregnant. That's exactly what Jewel did when she found out her domestic worker was 3 months pregnant back in 2020. She reported it to the authorities right away.
First thing, like, what the hell? Yeah.
But at that point, borders were shut because of the pandemic, and there was no way Jewel could send her helper home.
They said they can't send her home now because why? The flights are only meant for emergency cases. So I was stuck there.
Jewel's domestic worker and boyfriend decided to terminate the pregnancy so that she can keep her job.
So out of my own initiative, I sent her to the nearest private hospital to have her termination done. It cost about almost $6,000 because the fetus is big. She has to go through like a normal birth. Yeah, it's a forced delivery. I paid for everything.
Every employer has to buy maid insurance when they hire a foreign domestic worker. But it doesn't cover pregnancy-related conditions, much less an abortion.
The first expense was seeing a gynae. The next expense was the termination. Okay, the boyfriend actually agreed to pay me back via installment.
But soon after, the installments ceased. Jewel had to work out another repayment plan.
So what I did was that I deduct 3/4 of monthly salary and the balance I give it to her for about 4 months. And she was agreeable to it. Then after that, I got calls from the embassy. My helper actually complained that she wasn't given salary for a couple of months.
After that call, Jewel's domestic worker ran away, and her case was escalated to the Manpower Ministry. Jewel was fined 2,000 Sing dollars for every month of non-payment. She also had to fork out her domestic worker's outstanding salary.
MOMs told me that salary has to be paid, irregardless. Yeah, and whatever hospitalization fee that is incurred by the domestic worker, even she's pregnant or there's a difficulty in pregnancy or whatever, employer has to bear it.
Jewel's helper was eventually sent home.
The etiquette to send her home, then PCR.
The total cost of the ordeal amounted to 17,000 Sing dollars. That's 12,000 US dollars, equivalent to nearly twice the median monthly household income in Singapore.
So this amount actually is a lot of money for middle income people like me. Yeah, but it's all gone to waste.
Jewel's financial loss might be compounded by the pandemic, but it is not rare for domestic workers' pregnancies to be reported to the authorities. According to the Manpower Ministry, between 2019 and 2021, an average of 170 domestic workers are deported every year. That's about 1 in every 1,000 domestic workers in Singapore. But the numbers only reflect those caught by the system. Pregnancies among domestic workers is common enough to catch the attention of activists working with migrant workers.
The broad rule still exists, and the broad rule still, at least it is discriminatory towards domestic workers who are pregnant, because it doesn't affect any other class of worker in Singapore, in that local residents are not subject to these rules. And it is a right for every woman to be pregnant if she so wishes to.
The practice in Singapore is in sharp contrast to another Asian financial hub the city is often compared to, Hong Kong.
即係有咗 BB 之後，跟住我又炒一個工人嘅話，其實就犯法嘅，我就要俾人罰10萬蚊嘅。
In Singapore, once pregnant, domestic workers are sent back and they risk being banned from working in the city-state ever again. It's a different story in Hong Kong. Here, the pregnancy rights of migrant domestic workers are protected.
So they are entitled to maternity leave and also protection according to the labor ordinance, like everybody working woman in Hong Kong.
Those rights include payment of wages, granting of statutory holidays, and paid maternity leave. But pregnant workers might not be fully aware of their rights. So Pathfinders, Hong Kong's only charity dedicated to helping migrant mothers and their children, helps them navigate their birth care rights.
What do you need the most at this moment?
Yeah, I need like food, like everyday use. I'm planning to bring back home my baby.
We will guide you how to register in the public hospital, and then after that you will, you can get like free prenatal checkup.
Giving birth in a public hospital would cost just $50. On top of that, employers are barred from firing the domestic workers because of their pregnancy.
即係有咗 BB 之後，跟住我又炒一個工人嘅話，其實就犯法嘅，我就要俾人罰10萬蚊嘅。
3 years ago, Danny's domestic worker revealed to him she was pregnant. Under Hong Kong law, if a domestic worker has been employed for at least 40 weeks, employers like Danny would need to provide maternity benefits, including 14 weeks maternity leave. News of the pregnancy meant a sudden and considerable financial burden to Danny, one that could amount to over a third of his annual income.
咁嗰14個禮拜係叫做有薪假期啦，咁我又要俾翻正常人工嘅80% 嘅。咁第二，咁佢又做唔到嘢，咁我屋企嗰啲嘢，我要可能再請個鐘點翻嚟去照顧我或同埋照顧佢喎。咁其實香港一個鐘點咧，其實你預翻大概800蚊一日到啦。咁如果嗰14個禮拜我又要請嘅話，其實計翻條數，我800蚊一日乘翻7日，跟住再乘翻14個禮拜咧，咁就都成7萬幾8千幾蚊咁樣，都好貴喎，都幾難負擔同。我請佢係其實想去即係打理我屋企啊。咁照顧我啲起居飲食，咁佢都做唔到，咁可能甚至可能我有機會我要照顧翻佢轉頭先，咁其實我覺得有少少唔公平嘅。
Should the domestic worker decide to deliver her baby in Hong Kong, her employer is legally obligated to house her. although they are not required to take in the baby.
Giving the space in Hong Kong, all households, have a limited space. So that's why we see the live-in arrangement may not be feasible. It will most likely lead to unlawful termination. Because this is also against the law. So the whole policy, it seems a bit contradicted itself.
So Pathfinders hopes to work with the government to find alternative housing for helpers on maternity leave. They also want to ease the financial burden placed on employers.
We explore the possibility whether the insurance company will see that as a package. Can it be covered the maternity leave as well? We're still under in discussions.
In Hong Kong, maternity protection for domestic workers is enshrined in law, although it still takes efforts by charities like Pathfinders to make it a practical ground reality. In Singapore, domestic workers have no legal maternity protection, and observers see little social appetite for change.
We could work towards a system like the one they have in Hong Kong, but it needs a lot of buy-in from employers. I think it needs a huge mindset shift because employers at this point are not willing to put up that cost. Agents are also not willing to take on this cost because they're running a profit-driven model. So unless compelled, I think, by the state, by the government, it's going to be very hard to make this shift in Singapore, or unless the state decides, to take on some of the responsibility or financial burden as well.
For employer Jewel, one encounter with a pregnant domestic worker was already one too many. She now has a new criterion for a domestic worker to minimize risk of ever encountering the same problem again.
She has to be at least 40 years old or 38 years old. At that age, when she comes to Singapore, is really looking for money. Yeah, it's not coming here to look for a partner. I've been through a lot of emotional up and downs ever since she left the house. Yeah, so I do not want any additional stress pertaining to this.
Looking back, she takes the view that the financial and legal responsibility for a pregnant domestic worker should also be borne by the man who fathered the baby.
Number one, you penalize the employer. Number two, you penalize the maid. And then the man, who's going to penalize them? So they run away free and start doing, once the maid has been blacklisted, gone home, then the cycle starts again to a new girl. I don't know how, but I think if you penalize the maid, you should also penalize the male.
Jeff, who impregnated a domestic worker while working in Singapore, considers himself an exception to the norm. He supported his pregnant girlfriend financially for 19 months, stopping only after he lost his job in Singapore.
Not everyone will report in help. They just fade away or hide or something. It's a huge responsibility. Maybe they are also a family man, or they are just an ordinary typical worker who doesn't have that much. That's why they try to avoid. That's the hard part, because the one that will suffer in care of the women.
Sunny gave birth to a baby boy who was born out of wedlock. She has reconciled with her family in Indonesia, who are now taking care of a child. Having evaded the blacklist, she has since returned to Singapore to work.
Pregnancy criminal. I mean, all those women get pregnant, are they criminal? It's not that really plain to come here to get pregnant, I mean, just like send them back home and give them a chance to come back. But at least don't ban them.
It's going to be very difficult for the rules on domestic worker pregnancy to change. I don't see anything that's changing in the landscape that will necessitate this change to happen anytime soon.
People fall in love, we cannot say it's their fault falling in love, right? So actually the help also will feel themselves. It's very stressful and really for them. So Maybe don't need to say that it's your fault also. Because this is really unplanned pregnancy.
Currently, Singapore has legal provisions enshrined in law to protect pregnant women from wrongful dismissal. But those laws exclude domestic workers. The Republic is by no means alone in this. More than 6 in 10 domestic workers globally are not legally covered for maternity benefits. Until the laws and attitudes change, pregnant migrant domestic workers will continue to be backed into a corner and forced to take desperate measures.